I never thought I'd find myself in a school lockdown. Growing up in a small town, I always felt safe, shielded from the harsh realities that other places faced. Yet, on a gray Tuesday afternoon in March, everything I believed about safety shattered. It started like any other day. Mrs. Parker, our math teacher, was going over quadratic equations, and I was tuning out. I was eager to see my friends after class, talk about Friday night's party, maybe make plans for the weekend. But then, the school intercom crackled, and the principal's voice came through, shaking and urgent. Attention students and staff, lockdown procedures are now in effect. I repeat, lockdown procedures are now in effect. The chill that ran down my spine was immediate. We had practiced lockdowns before, but those drills felt like nothing compared to the real thing. Mrs. Parker's face drained of color as she moved to lock the door, and we scrambled to turn off the lights, huddling in the corner of the classroom. The fluorescent lights flickered off, plunging us into an unsettling darkness punctuated only by the faint glow of our phones. I sat beside my friend David, who was visibly shaking. His eyes darted around as if he could see something threatening lurking within the shadows. "What's happening?" he whispered, but I didn't have an answer. We pressed ourselves into the corner, trying to blend in with the walls. Time seemed to stretch, each second feeling like an eternity. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed down the hallway, followed by the sound of running footsteps. My heart raced. Was this a drill gone wrong, or was there something more sinister happening? I glanced at Mrs. Parker, who was speaking quietly into her phone, her brow furrowed. Her expression worried me more than any noise we'd heard. Through the thin crack at the bottom of the door, a shadow passed by, long and dark. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't aware that I had shifted to the front of the room until I felt David tugging at my shirt. "Get back," he hissed. I slowly retreated, but the shadow returned, stopping just outside our door. I could hear a faint murmur, like someone was speaking in a low voice. It sent chills coursing through my body. The voice became louder, sharper. It was a woman's voice, frantic. "Let me in. Please." This sounded like a nightmare straight out of horror movies. Mrs. Parker turned to us, her expression a mix of fear and resolve. "Stay quiet. No matter what you hear, we stay here." But in that moment, I knew we were no longer just students. We were prey. We had unwittingly entered the realm of the hunted. Minutes felt like hours as we held our breath, waiting for something to happen. Finally, the lockdown ended with a soft click of the intercom. "All clear. You may resume normal activities," the principal's voice announced, but it felt hollow, devoid of any reassurance. I hesitated before moving. Things felt off. Mrs. Parker cautiously opened the door, and we spilled out into the hallway, our hearts still racing. The sight that greeted us was surreal. Teachers were in the hall, looking just as shaken as we were. We later learned it wasn't a drill but a response to a nearby incident, a domestic dispute that had escalated. Our school was never in any direct danger, but the fear etched into our faces told a different story. Months later, I still find myself thinking about that day. I replay the fear, the uncertainty, that voice begging to be let in. In a world where danger feels abstract, the shadows that lurked in our hallway that day became terrifyingly real.
I've debated sharing this story for years, wondering if anyone would even understand the gravity of that day. It's not just a memory, it's a haunting echo that follows me. All the horror seen in movies pale in comparison to the real-life experiences that unfold in mundane settings like schools. It was a chilly October day. Leaves had started to turn, and the air smelled of impending rain. We were in school, and the usual rhythm of classes enthralled us. I was sitting in the high school auditorium, squished between my friends Jenna and Lucas, waiting for a guest speaker. This man, who we were told had a remarkable tale of resilience, was supposed to inspire us. Little did we know that his visit would trigger the most terrifying moment of our lives. The auditorium had just grown quiet as the man began to speak, sharing stories of triumph over adversity. His voice resonated in the packed room, everyone hanging onto his every word. But then, abrupt and jarring, the intercom blared to life. I didn't catch the full message, only fragments. Code red, lockdown, critical situation. A sense of dread washed over me. This wasn't a drill, it felt all too real. The laughter from moments before faded, leaving a heavy silence suffocating the room. Teachers sprung into action, ushering students in a frantic attempt to lock the doors. I glanced around, gauging the panic in my friends' eyes. There was fear, confusion, and in my heart, a growing sense of something terrible. I remember Jenna squeezing my hand tightly, her nails digging into my palm. "What's going on?" she whispered, her eyes darting around the dimly lit room. We had practiced lockdown drills but had never encountered anything serious. It felt surreal, like everything slowed down to a crawl. With the lights flickering off, darkness enveloped us, save for the faint glow of cell phones that others desperately turned on. I craned my neck, trying to see the stage. The speaker stood frozen in disbelief, his inspiring words now lost in the chaos. The auditorium doors locked with a reverberating thud, sealing us in as our surroundings transformed into a fracture of reality. Minutes turned into an eternity as the silence deepened. We huddled together, our breaths audible, filling the void with noise. I could hear Jenna start to cry softly, her body shaking with each inhaled breath. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything was going to be okay, but I couldn't even assure myself of that. Then, a noise pierced the thick silence, a loud, echoing bang from somewhere beyond the doors. Gasps rippled through the crowd, freezing us in place. My heart raced as I glanced at the stage, where the speaker had turned pale, the flicker of fear replacing the passion of his earlier speech. What could be happening outside? "Stay down," a teacher's voice echoed in the darkness, attempting to maintain a facade of control. But what comfort could be found in their words? I couldn't shake the feeling that we were entwined in a nightmare. The whispers began, frantic and hushed. People started exchanging frantic glances, their wide eyes filled with dread. "What if it's real?" Lucas murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I had no answer. We could only grip onto one another, hoping our unity could stave off the terror enveloping us. Then, it all escalated when the lights went completely out. The darkness was total, an oppressive blanket smothering any semblance of security we clung to. Panic erupted as some students began to scream, while others huddled together, trying to form a sense of protection amid the chaos. "Everyone, stay calm." I heard the principal's voice on the intercom, but it did little to dull the resignation that gripped the room. I could barely hear it over the pounding of my heart, a frantic drum echoing in my ears. More banging erupted, relentless and terrifying. The door rattled as if someone was trying to get in. My breath quickened. Every rational thought vacated my mind. It felt hopeless. In that suffocating darkness, I realized that we were trapped within our own fear. I felt Jenna clutching onto me tighter, her fear palpable. I whispered to her, "It'll be okay. We'll be okay." But even as I spoke, I could hear the quiver in my own voice. As time stretched painfully, I leaned against Lucas, who had gone deathly silent. The moments felt like hours, the atmosphere thick with uncertainty. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the faint sound of footsteps grew louder, followed by muffled voices. My heart dropped, and I strained to make out the words. "Lockdown's been lifted," one voice said. I couldn't differentiate the relief from the fear.
I still get chills thinking about that day, our school lockdown that started as a drill but turned into the most terrifying experience of my life. It was supposed to be a routine exercise, the kind they've drilled into us since elementary. But this time, it wasn't just practice. It was real. It was a gloomy Thursday morning, and we were halfway through second period. I remember the faint tapping of rain against the windows while our teacher droned on about the French Revolution. Then the intercom crackled. "Teachers, this is a lockdown. This is not a drill." The tone of the principal's voice sent a jolt through the room. It was controlled but tinged with panic, something none of us had ever heard before. Our teacher's face went pale as she immediately bolted to the door, locking it with shaking hands. She pulled the blinds down on the windows and motioned for us to get under our desks. The lights went out, plunging the room into an eerie, silent darkness. We huddled together in the corner, trying to control our breathing. Every tiny noise, rustling paper, muffled footsteps from another room, sounded magnified in the silence. It was suffocating, the kind of fear that seeps into your bones when you realize things are spiraling beyond control. My friend Jake was sitting next to me, his eyes wide with panic. "What if it's someone with a gun?" he whispered, barely audible. I didn't want to believe it, but the idea had already planted itself in my mind. Then came the most chilling part. Faint footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Slow, deliberate. Someone was out there, moving door to door, testing the handles. We held our breath. The door rattled lightly as if someone were trying to see if it was locked. I could feel the collective tension in the room, like a stretched rubber band ready to snap. Our teacher crouched behind her desk, silently motioning for us to stay put. Every second dragged on like an eternity. The sound of footsteps grew louder, stopped right outside our door, and then, nothing. Just silence. For the next 5 minutes, though it felt like hours, there was no sound except for the pounding of my heart in my ears. I could see everyone's faces, frozen in fear, eyes wide with disbelief. And then it happened. The doorknob started to turn slowly. My stomach dropped, and I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. But suddenly, the intercom crackled to life again. "All clear. The situation has been resolved." We didn't move for a few seconds, too paralyzed to comprehend what had just happened. Our teacher finally unlocked the door, her hand still shaking. We sat in stunned silence as she explained, someone had been spotted on school grounds with a suspicious item, but it turned out to be a false alarm. Relief flooded over me, but it was mixed with exhaustion and something darker, an understanding of how fragile safety is. Even though the lockdown was lifted, none of us felt truly safe anymore. That day, the routine drill became real, and the classroom that had once felt like a sanctuary became a reminder of how vulnerable we are in the face of the unknown. Even now, every time I hear the word lockdown, I feel that knot of fear tighten in my chest, and the sound of slow footsteps in an empty hallway still haunts my dreams.